In the first and second days of training, you learned how to request data from the server to use in your application. In this video, you will learn how to send data to the server using the Flex HTTPService component. You will also handle the confirmation message from the server that returns the record ID for the data that was inserted into the database. In earlier videos, you retrieved data from the server and bound it for display to the employee drop-down list control of the employee portal vehicle request form. In this exercise, you will send the data entered into this form to the server so that it can be inserted into a database. When I select an employee from the drop-down list control, this pre-fills the text input control for the employee's office phone number. I'm adding a mobile phone number and then selecting the pickup and return dates from the date chooser controls. The second control is outside your viewing area. When I submit the form to the server, all of the data is sent, the server submits the data to the database, and then the record ID is returned to the Flex application, which displays it in this alert dialog box. This is the main application starter file. All of this code should be familiar to you since you built it over the last 3 days of training. The HTTPService object retrieves the employee's data from a remote server and then loops over from an array collection of generic objects into an array collection of employee value objects based on this employee class in the value objects package. On each iteration of the loop, the employee instance is added to the employee's class property, which is bound to the employee's property of the vehicle request form custom component, which is the view in our MVC implementation. In this component, the data is bound to the drop-down list control. That is how the data is coming into the custom component. Now let's review the data flow as it leaves the custom component in an event object to be handled by the main application. On the form's Submit button click, the handler instantiates the vehicle request class to create a value object that contains all of the data from the form. This data is then passed as an argument into a custom event, which packages it in the event object. This event object is dispatched to the vehicle request form instance in the main application. I am control-clicking on its registered event handler so that you can see that the application currently only shows an alert message that the form was submitted. I have added a breakpoint to the closing curly brace of this handler, and now I'm debugging the application. In the browser, I'm filling out the form and then submitting it. The form data is dispatched from the custom component to the main application and then handled by the event handler that hits this breakpoint. When prompted, I'm switching to the debugging perspective and drilling down into the event object to see the form data. Now that I have the form data in the main application, I can send it to the server. In the declarations block, I already have one HTTPService object, but I want to create a second instance to send data back to the server. I am typing HTTP and pressing Control Space twice to show code templates in the Content Assist tool and selecting the HTTPService object code template. To the new HTTPService object, I am modifying the ID property so its value is vehicle service, and I am changing the URL to point to a Cold Fusion page that will accept the data. Remember that although we are using a ColdFusion server for this training series, you can use any backend technology like Java, JSP, .NET, or PHP that can accept the data in an HTTP operation. The Flex code is the same regardless of the backend technology. I am using Flash Builder, Content Assist to create a result handler in the result event. Lastly, I am deleting the fault and the result format and show busy cursor properties. Most server-side processes usually define the type of parameters that they accept and the type of data that will be returned. There are two ways to send parameters on an HTTP service request: parameter binding and explicit parameter passing. In parameter binding, you can directly bind the values from UI controls or data models directly to the parameters. This method of sending data is only available if you have created the HTTP service object in MXML and not in ActionScript. The advantage of using this method is that you can apply validators to the parameter values before submitting them to the service. To implement this method, simply create a request property and pass one or more parameters as XML nodes. You then actually send the data to the server using the service object's send method. In this code, you can see the request property defined as a property of the HTTP service object. You can pass one or more values to the server by directly binding them in XML nodes. Since this service is named employee service, you send the data to the server on some user or system event by referencing the employeeService.send method. The second method for passing data in HTTP service calls is explicit parameter passing. You provide the parameters for the service in the service's send method as you would provide arguments to a function. The downside of this method is that you cannot use automatic flex data validation, which you will learn about later in this day of training. This first example passes the employee ID parameter with a value of 4 as a name value data pair. Alternatively, you can create an object and then pass that object in the send method as shown in this second example. This is the way that I will send the data to the server for the company vehicle request form. In the custom event handler for this custom component, I am adding the vehicle service.send method. You just saw in the debugging session that the event object contains the vehicle request data object with all the form data. I am adding event.vehicleRequestData to the send method and then saving the file. I am selecting the network monitor view and maximizing it so that I will be able to see the audit trail more clearly. I am enabling the tool and then running the application. You can see that the first HTTP service call retrieves the data for display in the drop-down list control. I'm selecting an employee from the drop-down list control and a return date and pickup date from the date chooser controls. I'm leaving the mobile phone field blank and submitting the form. The application displays a submission alert message that confirms that I hit the submit button, but I also get a runtime error. When I return to Flash Builder, you can see that a second service request is made for the post operation, but there is an error. I'm opening the Response tab and switching to Raw View. The first line tells me that I have experienced a 500 internal server error. As I scroll down, I see a message that says, field vehicle request.mobilephone cannot be a 0-length string. I am minimizing the network monitor view and returning to my code. I'm going to add a fault handler to show an alert message when the mobile phone field is left blank. To the vehicle service HTTP service object, I am adding a fault event and using the Content Assist tool to generate the fault handler. I'm locating the generated fault handler in the script block and deleting the generated code stub. Within the function, I am adding the alert.show method to display the event.fault.fault string value as the text in the alert pop-up. I am also giving the alert message a title of fault information for post, saving the file and running the application. Now, when I fill out everything, except for the mobile phone field, and submit the form, I see an alert message. I want to display an alert message with the record ID when the data is returned from the server successfully. So in the result handler, I am typing if and pressing Control space twice to show code templates in the Content Assist tool. I'm selecting the template for the if statement. I'm setting the if statement to evaluate the event.result.vehicle.vehicle.request.id value. Within the if statement, I'm adding an alert.show method that states the request was submitted. The record ID is, and then concatenating the event.result.data.vehicle.request.id. I'm saving the file, running the application, and then filling out the form. I'm going to select an employee from the drop-down list, put some string data into the mobile phone field, and then select some dates. When I submit the form, I see the record ID displayed. For your next step, work through the exercise titled Passing Data to the Server with the HTTP Service class.